Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean. And this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Please check us out online at couplesynergy.com or on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Couple Synergy. And please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. And now on to Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 25 years.
Everyone says you should work on your relationship, but nobody teaches us how. So we've created this podcast to teach people what they can do to create the relationship they've always dreamed of
with the partner they fell in love with. On today's episode, we are talking about the need to always be right. The path to isolation.
Nice.
Guaranteed, really. This is a guarantee, the path to isolation. Because, needing to be right is, and we're going to talk about this, it's going to lead to pushing people away. Right. And when we talk about the need to be right, we talk about the opposite of that, and that's humility. Right.
Yeah. If I have to be right, then everyone else has to be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we get into that, I just want to read off a review that came in. We want to thank all of you, our listeners and audience, for tuning in and listening to different podcasts that we do, or watching our podcast as well. This one came in by Seth, and he gave us a 5-star rating, and he said, "Awesome show with great advice and stories." Thank you so much.
On our show too.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Seth. That was really
Hope your
appreciative.
book is going well.
Yeah. So the need to be right. I have a great quote here. All right. And this is by Henry James. He's a famous author. And he said, "There is profound vulnerability behind the facade of invincibility of the person who always needs to be right. The road is one that ultimately leads to isolation, to a place where no one sees us as we see ourselves, to a theater where we get a standing ovation, all right, but we are the only ones applauding. In extreme cases, such as that of narcissism, the result is nothing short of a delusion." Powerful quote, but I think it just really sums up exactly what we're talking about here. And it is a relationship killer, right? The need to be right.
Yeah. And I think the need to be right comes from a developmental place.
Mm-hmm.
As a child, you're trying to learn, you're trying to do things right. But the right that you're trying to do things is something someone else decided.
Yeah.
Right. And so one family being right means you're sitting at the dinner table at 5:30 at night. And another family being right means that you maybe cook for yourself, I don't know, and do your own thing. It's very different in different households, and it doesn't seem that way. And as we mature, we learn there's many flavors of right, and they're not absolutes, they're not truths. They are what we know. They're just what we've learned.
Well, we're exposed to this multitude of rights. It is up to us and our upbringing to decide and determine that, hey, sometimes I'm wrong.
Yeah. Oh.
So sometimes I'm going to be wrong. And, I was just thinking, one of the things that we tell all of our couples who are working with them is that each of you have contributed equally to the condition of the relationship.
All relationships.
And that's absolutely the fact. In every case, in every relationship, each person contributes equally to the condition of that relationship. So if it is suffering, if there's a problem, if there's no communication going on, each person has contributed equally to that.
Yes.
And it takes someone to be able to say, "I'm wrong," to admit to their part.
That's really powerful. there's so much power in admitting you're wrong when you were saying that. And I think about, not that we ever fight, but,
No.
and you talk about what position would you rather be in, the one who is able to admit their own faults and try to extend the peace offering, or the person that sits there and goes, I'm right. And no matter how you apologize or what you say, it doesn't matter. I'm right.
Sure.
And that's that division you're talking about, that isolation.
And we're human beings. So So I have been on both sides of the coin there, right?
Yeah.
I've been in positions where I thought I was absolutely right, and I was going to stand my ground, and I was going to huff and puff and hold my breath and whatever. And all it did was just cause me a whole ton of heartache and anxiety and worry and anger and resentment. And it turns physical. Right. But I have learned over the years is that it is better to take the high road, to be able to say and admit, I made a mistake, or I contributed to this and making things the way it is, and admitting fault.
Do you find that it's difficult? Not difficult to say I'm wrong, which is difficult, but to know you're wrong. Because we're always choosing things because we think we're right.
So if you are a person that has low self-esteem, and your self-esteem, your ego is completely dependent on whether you are right, then yes, it would be almost impossible to be able to admit that you're wrong.
And it almost, it takes like a different level of seeing a situation to know if you're wrong, if you've done something that is from the perspective of another person. So you have to have that ability to perceive that.
Right.
And it is so incredibly easy to think you're right and to not know the whole story.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. And with limited information. In fact, people who need to always be right, they're only going to seek out information that's going to confirm their belief.
Right.
It's a confirmation bias. I'm only going to seek out stuff that is going to confirm what I believe in, and I'm going to reject anyone else's opinions or anything else that I see out there that is contrary to what my belief is.
Yeah, my favorite thing is when people have multiple therapists and they like to stick with the one who doesn't challenge them but agrees with them, which doesn't help them at all. And it actually can hurt them, which is so sad. And, you think about if you were raised in an environment where you always were told you were right, or where you were shamed for things that weren't wrong, and you become a parent, you're going to have a hard time disciplining your child in the ways of taking responsibility for that right and wrong. I remember a client I was working with, and I think her son was like 8 years old, and he was with his grandfather, and his grandfather, he was having a tantrum about wanting this bag of chips, and he ultimately grabbed it and ripped the chips, and they kind of flew all over. And the grandfather, I think he spanked the kid, and the mother was so appalled that the grandfather did that. And I said, "Well, does your son have to take responsibility for what he did?" And she just looked at me like, he was wronged. He doesn't have to take responsibility for his wrong.
Right.
And that's where we're getting this false information. It is never one person is right and one is wrong. It's always, and if you've ever resolved anything, you know that you always have to apologize for your half while the other person is being humble and apologizing for their half. That's where resolution comes from. Resolution never comes from, you know what, you're right and I'm 100% wrong.
We always tell our couples, you're both right and you're both wrong, because that's exactly what what it comes to in relationships.
And it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. None of the specifics of what happened or how a person wronged you, it doesn't matter, right? And it's not going to contribute to reconciliation.
Nope. It's never a thing.
No.
Being right is never actually a thing.
No, and we come across people who be like, I need people to apologize to me for this and this and that. Well, it's not going to happen. And even if you get
they
that,
don't apologize, right?
Of course, point the speck out in your neighbor's eye, but
have the plank in your own.
But ignore the plank in your own, because most of those people, they don't look at their contribution. They have to have everybody else kowtow to them because it's part of their ego, the fragile, insecure ego.
And ultimately what happens is the person that is on the receiving end of the demand of the person that says they're right all the time, they go away and they heal and they don't deal with the drama anymore. And the person that stays in that tug of war just finds more people to pick up the other end of the rope.
Right. And I blame social media for
It's a big part
making
of it.
things worse.
Yeah.
You know, if you were in a town of, 50 people or 100 people,
Yeah.
or I mean, even here where we live, it's like you have to confront things face to face, or you're going to be hiding yourself, when you go to town.
I have a good example. This just happened. So we went to get some more chickens.
Yeah.
We needed some more chickens.
We got chickens and goats now.
And two of the chickens are really tiny and one can run through the fence. And we were really concerned about this rooster that we have herding these little chickens. And so I contacted the person we bought them from and I said, these aren't really working out. Can I bring them back and exchange them for some bigger chickens? And she said, I'm sorry, I learned the hard way that I can't take chickens back. And my first reaction was like, how dare she? And, and then I was like, well, yeah, because now these chickens have been exposed to who knows what. And that could come back and wipe out her whole farm.
And it was a huge farm. Yeah.
And she has no idea what happened. And so after I waited a few minutes and got, after that shock of I couldn't get my way, right? Then I was like, okay, so I absolutely could put myself in her shoes and see why that she was holding that position, even though from my position, I felt like it had been hours, since we got these chickens. And but it's a different perspective, and we can never see someone else's perspective.
But that's just it. I mean, if you are that kind of person, which probably the person that needs to be right is not going to be watching this podcast.
Right,
it's really going to be people who know a person like that'll be listening to this. And, if you are that kind of a person, you're not going to take the time and effort to understand the other person's position.
Right. You're too busy trying to beat the drum of I'm right,
Exactly.
that you can't possibly put yourself in a position of seeing anyone else's point of view.
Yeah. And it's really pointless, actually, because until that person grows up and actually starts to become more mature and insightful and understands that they can't be right all the time, that other people are going to be right and they're going to make a mistake, they're going to be wrong, then that's going to help them come out of their shell and actually start to try to find a level of understanding in other people,
which helps you grow as a human being. And the need to be right keeps you in that immature developmental stage that doesn't allow you to mature, to be able to be kind and to offer, forgiveness and offer a bridge back to a relationship, because you want the whole relationship to come on to your side of the river.
Yeah. And ultimately it takes humility, and humility is very hard.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. There's a reason why one of the 7 deadly sins is pride.
Yeah.
Right. Because
one of the 7 deadly sins is not being wrong.
No, it's pride and arrogance, right? Believing that you are it and you have superiority over other people. And that's really what it puts you in. When you have this need to always be right, you have this need to be superior.
Wow. It's a really false level of certainty that you
think
that you could possibly think you're always right. And I think it's normal for us to doubt and question,
I think it is for someone who is open, right? Someone who doesn't have as fragile of an ego that they can extend themselves to be in a position of vulnerability and say, I don't know if I did the right thing. Right.
It kind of reminds me of my theory of, like when you watch superhero movies and there's always the villains. And the good guys always win because the villains always turn on each other, and so if you're going around making enemies because you need to be right and you need other people to be wrong, ultimately you're going to be treated that way as well. And that's where that isolation.
That's
piece comes in.
exactly what Henry James wrote about is, you are going to be constantly pushing people away because they are going to get this thing in their head saying this person, he's that person that always thinks he needs to be right.
Yeah.
Right. Or she's always this person and thinks she needs to be right. And so you're not going to want to be around them.
Right. I was thinking if someone like that is listening to this, they're going to think we're wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, it's okay. They'll turn off.
Yeah. Humble pie, it's not so bad. And there's so much goodness in humility. Humility is a fabulous word because it speaks to both our lowest frequency and our highest frequency. Our lowest frequency of humiliation, which all of us want to avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
And then our highest frequency of humbleness. And those are the great, all the great spiritual teachers have had to go through public humiliation with humbleness to show us how it's done. And that's always their story. The story is always, hey, follow me and forgive them. Right.
It is a very difficult road to take.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So we want to thank
Are
you.
You done?
Yeah, I
Are you
am.
right? Are you sure?
Oh. So we want to remind all of you that, if you have any questions or comments or topic suggestions, you can always email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. Let us know because, we keep coming up with fresh content for everybody and we want to know what you're interested in. That it really helps us. Also, just like Seth did, go on to wherever you listen to podcasts and, give us a review. It gives us an understanding again of, how well we're doing.
And if you want to kind of go deeper into these topics, we are hosting a personal and spiritual development weekend on September 5th through 8th. It's in Estes Park in Colorado. It's in a very beautiful lodge that's great. And if you want to join us or want more information, go ahead and email us.
So we want to thank all of you for joining us on Couple Synergy today. Our passion is in helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships. And this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners. For all of you listening, please let us know how you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions, again, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the home study course, the next Couples Relationship Enhancement Weekend, or the Spiritual Retreat Weekend,
The
Mountaintop Retreat, or our couples coaching program called Couple to Couple, look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.